I had worked all through the first 4 years of our first child, and it was really hard. And so when we had our second, I just felt like I didn't want to waste any second of it, and I didn't want to be on set. I just felt like I needed to be at home with the kids.
Elisha Cuthbert was one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood by the time she was 22. Movies, hit TV shows, magazine covers, all of it came fast and never really slowed down. Then one day, at the peak of her career, she just stopped. She disappeared from acting for 4 full years while everyone wondered what happened. Now she's finally talking about it, and what she's saying is not what most people expected. It's not a story about burnout. It's not a story about a scandal. And it's definitely not the kind of answer Hollywood usually lets its biggest names say out loud. Before we get into why she left, you have to understand how fast everything happened for Elisha Cuthbert in the first place, because that speed is actually the reason the disappearance made so much sense later. Elisha grew up in Calgary, Canada, and started acting as a kid, picking up small parts on local Canadian productions before she'd even hit her teens. She didn't come from a family with industry connections. She just started auditioning young, the way a lot of Canadian child actors do, building up a string of small credits long before anyone outside the industry knew her name. By her late teens, she had already landed a spot on the hit show 24, playing Kim Bauer, the daughter of Kiefer Sutherland's character. The show was massive. It was one of the biggest dramas on television, and suddenly Elisha was a name people recognized everywhere she went. The character of Kim Bauer became a defining part of pop culture in its own right during the show's early seasons, which meant Elisha was getting recognized for a role that put her through high-stress, high-stakes scenes week after week, long before she'd finished growing up herself. That kind of exposure at such a young age is rare, and it meant she was learning to handle public attention in real time, with no real model for how to do it. Then came the movie that really changed things. In 2004, she starred in The Girl Next Door, a comedy that became a defining film of that whole era. The movie made her one of the most talked-about young actresses in the business almost overnight. She followed that with Old School, another huge comedy hit, and her name started showing up everywhere. Magazine covers, talk shows, red carpets. Here's the thing people don't always think about. Elisha was barely in her 20s when all of this happened. She didn't get years to grow into fame slowly. It hit her all at once, while she was still figuring out who she even was as a person, separate from the roles she was playing. That kind of speed builds a career fast, but it also sets up a pattern that's really hard to break later. The constant need to keep working, keep saying yes, keep showing up, because that's just what you do when the opportunities keep coming. And for the next several years, that's exactly what she did. What followed The Girl Next Door wasn't a slow, comfortable career. It was a non-stop run of work that lasted well over a decade, and almost nobody outside the industry realizes how relentless that actually was. After her early movie success, Elisha kept booking projects steadily. She went on to star in Happy Endings, a sitcom that ran for several seasons and built her a whole new audience who knew her from comedy instead of action drama. Between 24, her film roles, and Happy Endings, she basically worked back-to-back for more than 10 years straight. New show, new movie, new press tour, repeat. In between those bigger projects, she was also taking smaller film roles to keep working consistently. Parts in movies that didn't always make headlines but still meant travel, auditions, and time away from any kind of settled routine. Happy Endings in particular required a completely different kind of performance than what she'd built her name on. It was a fast, joke-heavy ensemble sitcom, and shifting from teen drama to broad comedy meant relearning her own timing and rhythm as a performer, essentially starting over creatively while still carrying the public expectations that came with being already famous. People who aren't in the entertainment industry sometimes picture acting as glamorous and easy. Show up, say some lines, get paid. The reality for someone working at Elisha's level during those years was a lot closer to a never-ending job with no real breaks. Long shooting days. Press obligations stacked on top of filming. Constant travel. And underneath all of it, the quiet pressure that comes with being a known face. The sense that if you stop, even for a little while, people might forget about you, or worse, someone else might take your spot. Elisha kept going through all of it. She built a real, lasting career out of that grind, which is honestly rare. A lot of actors who blow up fast in their early 20s don't last past their late 20s. She did. But there's a cost to that kind of constant output that doesn't show up right away. It shows up later, usually right around the time life hands you something bigger to think about than your next project. For Elisha, that something bigger arrived in the form of a completely different life, one that had nothing to do with sets, scripts, or cameras at all. Somewhere in the middle of all that non-stop work, Elisha's personal life took a turn that would end up mattering a lot more than any single role she ever played. She met and eventually married Dion Phaneuf, a professional hockey player who spent years in the NHL playing for teams like the Calgary Flames and the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he served as team captain for several seasons. Being married to a pro athlete comes with its own version of a demanding schedule. Different cities, different seasons, a life that moves around constantly depending on trades and team schedules. It's a lifestyle that requires flexibility, and honestly, a willingness to put down roots somewhere new more than once. The two of them actually met years before they got married, having known each other socially for some time before their relationship turned romantic. Once they got engaged, the wedding itself became its own kind of media event, with outlets covering the guest list and the ceremony details the way they would for any high-profile celebrity pairing. Building a life together also meant Elisha adjusting her own work schedule around hockey's demanding calendar, which runs from fall through late spring with constant travel for road games, a rhythm that doesn't naturally sync with a film or television production schedule at all. The two of them got married in the summer of 2017. And not long after that, their family started to grow. They welcomed their first child a couple of years into the marriage, and a second child followed after that. This is the part of the story that usually gets skipped over in articles about celebrities. Having kids doesn't pause anything in Hollywood automatically. Plenty of actors go right back to work within months of having a baby, because that's the expectation, and because stepping away can feel like a career risk nobody wants to take. Elisha did go back to work after her first child was born. She kept acting, kept showing up, kept doing exactly what she'd always done. But something about that experience stuck with her. Working through the early years of her first child's life while still trying to be present as a mom turned out to be a lot harder than she expected. And that difficulty is the actual reason everything changed when her second child came along. This is the part Elisha has finally talked about directly, and it's a lot simpler than the rumors that floated around for years. In a recent interview on the Today Show, Elisha opened up about what was actually going on in her head during that period. She explained that during her first child's early years, she had kept working through almost all of it, and trying to separate being a mom from being a working actress turned out to be genuinely hard. Not impossible, but hard in a way that wore on her. What made it specifically difficult, based on what she's described, wasn't any single bad day on set. It was the constant mental switching, being fully present as a parent in the morning, then needing to shift completely into a totally different headspace for hours of filming, then trying to switch back again at night without much time to actually transition between those two roles. Over time, that back and forth became something she didn't want to keep doing, especially once she had a second child to think about and could compare how different it felt to actually be fully present versus splitting her attention the way she had the first time around. There's also a practical side to this that doesn't always get talked about. Film and television schedules don't really bend for parenting. Call times can start before sunrise, and a single day of shooting can stretch well past 12 hours depending on what the production needs. For someone trying to be present for a baby's actual daily rhythm, naps, feedings, the small windows of time that matter most, that kind of schedule isn't flexible in the way a lot of other jobs can be. Elisha has talked about realizing that the version of presence she wanted with her second child simply wasn't compatible with also being on a call sheet. So when her second child was born, she made a different choice. She said she didn't want to miss any of it this time. She didn't want to be away on a film set while her baby was growing up at home. She wanted to actually be there, for the small, everyday moments that don't make headlines but that you can't get back later. That decision is what led to the 4-year break that had people speculating for so long. There was no scandal. No falling out with Hollywood. No mysterious health issue being hidden from the public. It was a parent looking at her life and deciding that being present for her kids mattered more, at least for that stretch of time, than staying visible in an industry that doesn't usually wait around for anyone. What makes this stand out is how rare it actually is for someone at her level of fame to say this out loud, plainly, without dressing it up. Plenty of actors talk vaguely about wanting balance or stepping back to recharge. Elisha's explanation was specific and direct. She wanted to be home, and she enjoyed every single minute of it. No regrets attached. No spin. Just an honest answer to a question people had been asking for years. And eventually, when the timing felt right again, she came back. 4 years is a long time to be away from an industry that moves as fast as Hollywood does. New actors break through constantly. Shows get cancelled and replaced. The whole landscape shifts. Coming back after that kind of gap takes more than just wanting to work again. It takes the right project showing up at the right moment. For Elisha, that project turned out to be Every Summer After, a new series on Prime Video based on the popular book by author Carly Fortune. The show gave her a real reason to step back into acting, and from everything she said publicly, it felt like a comfortable, natural way to return rather than a rushed decision made out of financial pressure or fear of being forgotten. The book the show is based on had already built a large, dedicated readership before any cameras started rolling, which meant the project came with built-in attention and an audience that genuinely cared about seeing it adapted well. For Elisha, stepping into a production with that kind of existing foundation took some of the pressure off what a comeback role usually carries. She wasn't introducing herself to a brand new audience from scratch. She was joining something that already had momentum, which let her ease back into the work without it feeling like she had something to prove all over again after 4 years away. There's also something practical worth noting about the role itself. Unlike a starring part that would have required Elisha to carry the full weight of a comeback on her own, this project let her step into more of a supporting position within an ensemble. That meant a return that didn't ask everything of her all at once, a way back into the industry that matched the pace she actually wanted, rather than forcing her straight back into the kind of non-stop schedule that had originally worn her down. On set, Elisha found herself in an interesting position. She wasn't just acting anymore, she was one of the more experienced people in the room, working alongside younger cast members who were just starting to navigate the kind of fame she'd already lived through twice. One of those younger actors, Sadie Stanley, who leads the show, spent real time talking with Elisha about what it's actually like working in this industry. Elisha has said she shared specific moments from her own past experiences, the kind of things that, looking back, she wished someone had told her earlier. She talked about what made certain situations easier to handle, lessons she only figured out after going through them the hard way herself. That detail says a lot about where Elisha is now compared to where she was at 22. Back then, she was the one being thrown into massive fame without much warning. Now she's the one other people are coming to for advice, which is its own kind of full circle moment. Step back from the specific details for a second, and the bigger picture here is worth sitting with. Elisha Cuthbert had one of the fastest rises in early 2000s Hollywood. She worked non-stop for over a decade, built a real and lasting career, got married, had 2 kids, and then made a choice that a lot of people in her position never get to make, or never feel like they're allowed to make. She stepped away. Not because she had to. Not because something went wrong. Because she looked at her life and decided her kids needed her more than the industry did, at least for a while. It's worth pointing out how different her path looks compared to a lot of other actors who became famous around the same time she did. Plenty of performers from that exact era of early 2000s comedies either burned out completely, faded from the public eye without ever choosing to step back, or kept working non-stop well past the point where it seemed to genuinely interest them. Elisha's story stands out specifically because the pause was intentional and the comeback was equally intentional. She wasn't pushed out by the industry, and she didn't disappear by accident. Both decisions, leaving and returning, came from her actually weighing what she wanted at each specific point in her life. There's also a financial reality that usually gets ignored when people talk about actors stepping away. Not every performer who became famous in their 20s built up the kind of security that makes a 4-year break realistic. Walking away from steady income for that long is a genuine risk, one that requires either real financial planning or a level of comfort that not everyone in this industry actually has, regardless of how famous they were at one point. Elisha's ability to make that choice and stick with it says something about decisions she made earlier in her career, not just the decision to leave itself. It also says something about how she structured her professional life in the first place. Spreading work across film, a long-running television drama, and a multi-season sitcom isn't just a varied resume. It's a way of building income from several directions instead of relying on one project at a time, which tends to be exactly the kind of foundation that makes a long, deliberate break possible later without it turning into financial panic. That kind of groundwork rarely gets credit, mostly because nobody notices it until someone actually uses it the way Elisha did. And then, when she was ready, she came back on her own terms, not because she was scared of becoming irrelevant, but because the right project happened to land in front of her at the right time. There's something worth noticing in how plainly she talked about all of this. No big dramatic reveal. No tabloid-style confession. Just a mom explaining that she didn't want to miss her kids' early years, and that she's glad she made that call. In an industry that often treats stepping away from work as career risk, Elisha proved that sometimes walking away isn't the end of anything. Sometimes it's just a pause that needed to happen. Elisha Cuthbert walked away from a thriving career at its peak to be home for her kids, then came back 4 years later without losing a step. So here's the real question worth asking. Do you think Hollywood actually punishes people for choosing family over fame, or is that just an old assumption that doesn't really hold up anymore? Let us know which side of that you land on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe for more untold Hollywood tales, and hit the bell so you never miss a drop. Want more? Check out another one of our videos.